It being 6:30, I'll call to order the Oregon School District Board of Education meeting. Today is Monday, February 10th. We're at the Oregon Senior High School Innovation Center. Ms. Heitz, could you call the roll?
Ms. Feeney? Ms. Oderico? Ms. Flanagan? Mr. Pankratz? Ms. Bijak? Mr. LeBrun? Mr. Zach?
Present board has a quorum. I have notice or proof that the meeting has been appropriately noticed under Wisconsin Open Meetings Law, and a copy of that proof will be with Ms. Heitz if anyone wants to inspect that. Our agenda this evening is a short one. Our standard items under A through D. We don't have any, well, one potential action item is to review our trial of a committee of the whole process and the committee structure. Then we have 4 information items for discussion. And then we have a closed session to discuss a personnel matter at the end of our meeting tonight, and we will not return to open session after that meeting. So I'll need a motion to approve the agenda as posted. Is there a second? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? We have an agenda. Consent calendar number A on the agenda. Is there any item on the consent calendar that any board member wishes to have removed?
I just want to note that I was not here for the January 26th meeting.
Okay, and then pursuant to our protocol, you will be recorded as having abstained for those and would be able to vote on the remainder of the consent calendar. Agenda items, I would need a motion to approve then the items on the consent calendar.
So moved.
Is there a second? I'll note we have 4 donations, one for almost $9,000 from the Oregon Band Boosters for the summer program activity. Children's Hospital for a Healthy School grant of $2,000 to go to Brooklyn Elementary Healthier School Initiative. The Wisconsin State Council Knights of Columbus, almost $1,000 for special ed program. It's an annual gift. And Friends of Oregon School District, $900 for K-8 and math night. And we appreciate all those donations and support of the district. Tim?
Just a quick note for any of you who see the Knights of Columbus handing out Tootsie Rolls in April. Half of that money goes towards special education in the Oregon School District, and the other half of that goes to Oregon Special Olympics. So that is where that money is coming from.
Thank you, Tim. And then we also have a notice of retirement and resignation, which is Mary Corporal Pryor, who's been a faculty member in our district for 22 years. And so we will consider her notification to resign and retire. And we really thank her for all her time and years spent in service of the district and our students. So would you call the roll?
Mr. Pankratz? Yes. Ms. Oderico? Ms. Feeney?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes.
Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Mr. Zach?
Yes. Motion on the consent calendar. Items on the consent calendar are approved unanimously. Item B of the agenda is communication from the public. Board Policy 18004 has established the opportunity for members of the community to address the board. Is anybody registered? Is there anybody in the audience who would wish to speak as part of communication from the public? Once, twice, 3 times. Moving on to C, OEA report. John, anything? Okay. Student report. Hi, Cubby.
Hi.
Anything?
Yeah, a couple of things. In student council news, we have started preparations for our Q3 projects. In school news, our school play, which is titled Our Town, will be performing next week, Friday, Saturday, with a matinee performance on Sunday. Yeah, all those will be in the OHSPAC. Also, a few weeks ago, a couple of baby goats were born in our ag room. It actually received national news, so if you've been watching that, it was a great experience. It really brought the real world into our OHS classrooms. Winter sports seasons are coming to a close. Girls basketball has been doing extremely well. They might have even clinched the Badger South Conference, which I don't think they've won since like 2015 or so. Boys swim took 3rd place at the conference meet last weekend, and our boys hockey team earned the number 5 seed for their postseason.
Thank you, Cubby. item D, action items, review committee of the whole process and committee structure. And so just as a review, at our organizational meeting last April, we discussed whether to maintain for this year this committee structure that's prescribed by our board policy, which calls for presidential appointment of a committee for visioning and also for policy. And we decided to go with a committee of the whole experiment for this year to see how that would work, and then revisit that as we moved into the next year. So, with April coming up in an organizational structure, I talked to Krista about that, and she asked that we put that on the agenda for purposes of discussing whether or not to maintain our experiment in that regard, or whether to go back to a committee structure. So, Krista, do you want to start the discussion?
Sure. Having been on the board, I think this is my 4th year, and having been part of a committee structure and then a committee of the whole, I guess I would be in favor of going back to a committee structure for these reasons. One, I think it allows for more board members to be in a leadership position. I think as we look to the future, as Courtney goes off the board, Barb goes off the board, Steve is leaving the board, it's going to be a relatively inexperienced board, and I think committees really give you an opportunity to be in a leadership position, help look to the future of what the board should be doing, looking 30,000 foot in 5 to 10 years out with a visioning committee. Learning policy committee, I think, is a really important job because you really learn about the management of a school district through board policy and board governance. And then I think, secondly, it allows us more time for deliberation. When we've been in the committee of the whole, we've been looking at the clock because we want to get into a board meeting and get rolling. And I think these things are weighty subjects, and we need time for deliberation that's outside of a board meeting night that allows us research, both staff and board members, because I think these are really important things that deserve time and deliberation. So that's just my feeling on that.
Tim?
I never thought I would vote for more meetings. And I was looking forward to a committee of the whole to scale back the number of meetings that we have. But I really do, for the reasons Krista mentioned, I miss having those meetings. I think it allowed us to get together as often as we need to and to coordinate a few less schedules to have those meetings happen. I think we, the policies that we have in place are excellent policies, and we have run into a number of policies in the last couple of years that are unique, not just to our world here in Oregon, but across the country. And I think it does take a little bit extra effort, and it's hard to pull a large group through that process. I think it works. I think we're a little bit more agile, having a smaller group of people do the research, have the conversations, and come back here to make recommendations, and to have that group be able to answer questions through their research and deliberation. So again, never thought I'd ask for a meeting outside of a meeting, but I think it works better. And the leadership opportunities is also a valuable resource for new board members. So for the exact same reasons, I would vote to go back to a committee structure.
Barb, any thoughts?
I guess I'm recalling that one of the main justifications for going to a committee of the whole is to avoid having important discussions at the committee level that then have to be replicated again with the full board. So I'm a little bit torn on this because I think there is some value in that. And perhaps the way to get the best of both worlds is to have a committee structure to do some preliminary work, but when we are dealing with an issue where we know it might be beneficial to have the whole board in on a full discussion right from the get-go, bring those items right to the full board for discussion after some preliminary work has been done.
Courtney?
Well, given that I'm going off the board, I'm not sure my opinion should count as much as other people's opinion. I will say that during my tenure as a board member, when I started, there were a lot of committees, and those committees spent a lot of time in the weeds. Andy, I'm thinking of our building committee and talking about boilers and roofing projects and the like. But I do think that if you can organize the board committees in such a way that the focus is, as Krista said, on that 30,000-foot view, and you don't get down into the weeds, I think that's beneficial. So I guess my experience has been that those smaller committee meetings are very helpful to understand policy, to understand really the board's role in governance. One of the things that you talked about when we were first going to the idea of the committee of the whole was trying to lighten the load for administrators in terms of their time spent in meetings. And I'd be curious what their feedback would be relative to the sort of two structures of the board and how they felt those processes worked for them and for administrative issues. So I guess, if my colleagues are all in favor of going one way or the other, I certainly vote in support of what the majority wanted, since I'm moving on.
Troy, any thoughts?
Yeah, all good points by everyone. I guess I would lean more towards going back to a committee structure at this point. I just feel like we have a lot going on, and a committee structure allows us to have a little more focus on the important work that we have to do on both policy and visioning. And I think that having that committee structure then allows us to have regularly scheduled meetings where we can stay on top and ahead of some of those things. So.
Can I ask a question, Steve?
Go ahead.
If you were to go back to smaller subcommittees, there's no reason that wouldn't preclude you from having a committee of the whole meeting in the case of something like what Barb was suggesting, where there's a really important discussion and it's some preliminary work's been done in a smaller committee. You could still have a committee of the whole discussion relative to an important topic, right?
Yeah, I think the board,
Kind of a hybrid.
I think the committee chair would confer with the board president and say, hey, we've done some preliminary work, and we're going to be getting information that I think everybody should be at. We could do it at a committee whole basis and make sure everybody heard the information at one point so we don't have to replicate it. I think that would be the coordination between the committee chair and the board president at that time.
Could you also structure committees in such a way that you could have community members on those committees? I think back to our visioning committee where we had some representatives from the community at large way back when, and it wasn't really an official board committee, but it wasn't a task force either, to get important community feedback and input.
You could. I think the thought process in the past has been that where community input is needed on a particular issue, rather than being a formal committee member, you have them present and you get feedback that way. Or if it's of that nature, it's more appropriately for a task force or an ad hoc committee as opposed to a formal standing committee.
No, I was just thinking back
Yeah.
at that one. We had a vision committee at one
Right.
point that had some community
Right.
members on it. That was important. I mean, I thought there was some good thinking that came out of those meetings, and
I think on those sort of topics, we've moved more toward doing a task force
larger
on a
task force.
particular issue. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. I would prefer not. In that way, then you have to worry about voting and non-voting, and and the notices and quorums and all that sort of stuff. And so Brian or Gina or Andy, do you have any particular thoughts in terms of this? I know it's been nice not to have another night of meetings with it, and I think probably the sensitivity would be if we would go back to the two standing committees, that we would schedule them on maybe board nights so that we're not taking up two nights, kind of rotate them that way. I know from my perception, it was a good idea. I was hoping it could work because of the administrative convenience one, but I don't think we've gotten as much work done as we probably should have. I know from a president's role, it became another burden from this position to try to schedule and coordinate those things and try to pick leadership to run it and to, run the agendas for those. And I just think that it's going to be much easier with a designated chair for those to work with the designated administrator to facilitate those agendas and to move those items on and to work with the president. I wasn't getting enough done in that regard with it. So I think from that standpoint, it was hard to coordinate a little bit. I think we had a couple good sessions on that, but I think from Barb's standpoint is there's no reason why that wouldn't happen again, when we got the right issue to hold the committee of the whole. This got us used to working under that format, which we hadn't really done before. So I guess I'm in favor of going back to the old structure. I think we've got some visioning stuff that really could use some shepherding by the board and guidance with Dr. Bergstrom coming on and helping facilitate that move through. And we've got a couple policy items, including the one that we're going to just discuss briefly tonight, that we could move through, and an overall issue of what direction to take with our policy handbook. And I think a policy committee would really be important for that discussion going forward. So the question I would have, our policy reads that for this year we would have that and we would revisit that. I would still think we would need a motion to, go back to the old structure to reaffirm the two structures in policy. The question is, do you want to start that immediately or wait till the April organizational meeting?
I thought it was only a 6-month trial. Was that in air?
Yeah, I thought it was a year.
Oh, it was air. Okay.
The question would be, we could take action to, have those committees appointed. I think the board president appoints those committees. We've got, a policy on board to work with, and if we reconstitute a visioning committee, we could have that person start working with Brian and Leslie about the agenda for next year and for our annual retreat, that sort of thing, as we move into it. So thoughts on that?
I would entertain moving to it sooner rather than later, before the elections, because I think we have an anti-harassment policy. I think we have the May session, and I think it would be great to have Barb and Courtney on those committees for a month to a month and a half.
Only question then, when
You thought
our-
you were gonna, I know
No,
you had
no.
the number of meetings down to the core.
So when Courtney and I are off, the two new people will just be slotted into those two spots?
No, we would
you'd be
reorganize at that
okay.
point in time,
All right.
depending on what the leadership structure of the board is. The president for next year would appoint them. So, and I know you said that I was going off, but I have one more year left on my term.
You will be.
Yes, I have one more year. Yeah, just so that people understood that I'm not up for election. Okay, so I think the best way to handle this was, since we have it in policy, I had to take a motion. It looks like there's a consensus to return to the committee structure as outlined in policy and to have the board president appoint at the next meeting. So
I move that we go back to the committee structure and entertain, on a case-by-case basis, doing a committee of the whole when we see it necessary. And to do that soon.
Okay, this year, yeah. Okay, I need a second on that. Any discussion? Would you call the roll since it's a policy matter?
Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan? Yes. Ms. Feeney? Yes. Ms. Oderico? Yes. Mr. Pankratz? Yes. Mr. Zach?
Yes. So what I'll do is I'll communicate with each individual board member and see what preferences for the remaining year. I know we had a structure from last year, and it might be we follow that, but I'm just going to check in with you. Okay? Good. Thanks, everyone. That takes us into agenda item E, information items, and the first one on the agenda is the hate speech policy. As background, the board met in the committee of the whole at our last meeting. We were off camera in our small conference room to have a working session to review a real preliminary draft of this document with Gina, and to provide some preliminary feedback. When we came back into regular session as the board out of the committee of the whole, I announced that we would be bringing this back for public viewing, and we'd have a public discussion about it before it was voted on. Tonight we're not voting on it, but it's just to kind of introduce this to the public real briefly, and for Gina to let us know what her work has been on it since our committee of the whole meeting. So Gina, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So I asked Katie to include in the materials the path forward because we talked about that as a committee, about maybe just a place to start in terms of our equity work and what we stand for as a preamble to the policy. So it was kind of neat, honestly, to read this again because I haven't read it for a while. So it was really inspiring when I went back and looked at it. So what I did, and I know that it needs more work in terms of, so really took to heart to open the policy with what we stand for as a district. And so I just took a combination of what was there before and then just took out the language directly from the path forward about the equity work because I felt as though that is something the board had written and approved, but that doesn't mean that our thinking hasn't evolved since then. So if you read that and think, oh, that sounds familiar, it's because it's directly from the path forward. But then also I tried to look at other policies from other schools to see what they said about like what they stand for. So that's really where I got the third paragraph from and thinking about us. And I'm not wed to any of this because, it's an important topic and I know there's better thinking for multiple people to weigh in. But I started thinking that what I feel we've really talked about in our equity work is that we all share the responsibility for our learning environment. So not just on this policy, but school safety, like we've really talked with our students and our staff about that if you see something, that you say something, and that we all take responsibility for that, and that there are certain things, I think to use one board member's word, that we just don't tolerate in our district. So you'll see that in here, that what we're just not going to tolerate. It doesn't mean that means, one time you go to expulsion, but that is just, I think it's really good to reinforce with kids what our expectations and staff, what our expectations are. So you can probably expand on that. And then I added in here that, we would expect a staff person to intervene when they're witnessing something, that I think that's a fair expectation of staff, that we are past the point of staff saying, well, I heard this, but I didn't know what to do, because we've devoted a significant amount of time and resource to the topic. Doesn't mean we're not all still learning, but that our students have told us we need adults to step in and stand up. So I added a component of that. So I know it needs more work, but that's really where I started. And then the other issue that I'm struggling with is the curriculum part, because I know what I heard the committee talk about is, what about things in our curriculum? So, for example, it's not a part of our curriculum anymore, but like To Kill a Mockingbird, where there's words in there that are hateful, but it's part of the book or the poem that's being taught. And so that part I'm struggling with, like that felt weird to me. This is a policy that's going to go to parents and staff and students. And the way it reads right now, I don't like it because it seems to suggest, oh, we have, part of hate speech in our curriculum, but that's okay. And so I was talking to Leslie about it and we thought, why are we wrestling with this when we have great partners that can help us with this work? So one thing Leslie and I talked about is, going to our partners like Nehemiah and talking with them about how do we address the curriculum component without, giving a signal, oh, hate speech is a part of our curriculum, because it isn't. So I'm just probably talking too much because I've been really wrestling with that for the past week or so. So I know that part needs work as well. So that's what I've done since we talked last.
Great. I know one of our conversations in the committee of the whole was, balancing of interest between speech and the inappropriateness of certain words or language, and then the context in which those words are used, and then the repercussions of that. We had discussion about, no faulting, or no tolerance stuff versus context application of that. There are a lot of tough questions about that. So I think those are things that the policy committee will have to wrestle with on this. So anybody have any particular questions about anything in here? For Gina, else I think what would be appropriate would be for this to get referred to the policy committee for additional work. Anything in particular? Okay. Thanks, Gina. So, we've got that on table. I think one of the things we'll do is when Brian and I have our leaders meeting, we'll bring this up with our OEA leaders and say, hey, this is on our radar. Here's a draft of it, and policy is going to be working with it, so that we can start that feedback loop too, especially when we're talking about curriculum. All right. Anything else on that policy? Good. Thanks. Okay. The second item is forward a professional journal by Panthers for Panthers. And Brian, you want to introduce this?
Sure. This was a ad that we made last week, and we just learned that Jim and his team published this document, and they have a fancy one for all of you that they're going to distribute. And we thought it would be good for Jim and the team to come and share a little information in terms of the background that created this. And remember, this is all in service of our students and our theory of action at the high school. And some of you may already have it. Absolutely. Thank you.
I've got one. Yeah. I've got it.
So Jim, Andrea, and Brad, you have the floor when you are ready.
Are we on here? Thank you for having us tonight. We're proud to have in front of you our inaugural version of our journal, Forward. So this, Dr. Bussler asked me to share just a little bit about how this came to pass and really what this work represents. Over the last 5 years, we came into, when I came into Oregon High School, one of the very first things that we focused on was establishing in a high school, and high schools can very easily become siloed up and very difficult for people to know the good work that's happening across the hall or in other departments. And so we established some common vision, which we call our theory of action. And that theory of action is posted in every classroom, and it's something that is revised on a yearly basis. But if we're doing the right work, it really should only change, it should evolve. It shouldn't change wholesale in any one given year. And so during those first years, we focused on doing the work of the building, which is the work of the district. And together we worked to build trust and collaboration and to build opportunities for teams of teachers across disciplines to reflect deeply on evidence of student learning. And we did that through collaborative classroom visits, and then we started our instructional rounds protocols, which we became experts who study our work. And we then use that as an opportunity really to continue to highlight the good and to keep that next thing. You know, we're not the same school we were 5 years ago, and today we're not the same school that we will be 5 years from now. We're on a slow and steady build to better, and that really comes together. And so this was a vehicle that was the right time. It was the absolute right time. We're so proud of the work that our folks do in this building, and there is so many wonderful things that are happening. In a minute, I'll pass the mic to my partners, our instructional coaches here, and they can talk a little bit about the context that gave rise to this and why this was the right time. And it really is about, we respect the work that our folks do, and as we're going to create an opportunity to grow and be our own best resources together, we've got to give an opportunity for people to use their voices and to share. And so we see this as a project that isn't just a one-time thing. It isn't a destination. It's an opportunity for us to continue to showcase and then to learn from one another and use it as an opportunity to push our own thinking as we continue to get better. And when we think about the path forward is the visioning paper of the district, it's not it's not a coincidence that this is also forward titled. So who's my next? Which one? I'm going to Andrea.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for having us to share this. It's exciting work. So one of the things we have written in our brochure that we start the year with is a line or phrase that says, every staff member at Oregon High School is a learner and a leader. And if you put that in print, you better believe that, and you better have ways to honor that. So you would, maybe on an October 24th PD day, if you believed that about everyone who works at your school, you would say, let's spend some time sharing some of the good things that we're doing. So that's what we did on our October 24th PD day. We spent about 45 minutes getting into some small groups, and this was the protocol that we used. So you can see it's just to share something that after 2 months or so being at the work that you do, what's something that you know is forwarding our theory of action. So folks did that. They signed their names to our theory of action, which you can see there. And they said, this is where I see what I just shared. This is where I see it forwarding our theory of action. There's too much there. You don't write your name over the whole thing, but you say, yeah, that's really about purposeful collaboration, or that's really about measuring and reflecting on students' work and adjusting plans and actions because of that. And then this is where things got exciting, is the inside of the table tent. So after you shared with your colleagues and you said, hey, it would be a darn shame if some of the stuff that we just shared stopped right here. So let us in on what are some of those things. So you can see what people wrote in there. And then this gave us an invitation to Brad and us to go and talk to folks and say, would you be, how would you feel maybe possibly about writing something about what you shared? And then your group said, yeah, that's really, that's worth sharing more widely for sure. And that's how we came to have the authors, the 12 authors in here, write their pieces. And it made so much sense. And we've had this idea in our heads for years. But how you have it come to life in a way that makes sense, what Jim said is it's the right time. It made sense for us where we are now. So that's kind of how things came to be. And one of the things that Brad and I heard over and over multiple times from one person and multiple times across all of the authors was, thank you so much for the opportunity to do this. Thank you. So Brad's one of the authors, and I highly, highly recommend you read his piece, as I recommend you read all the pieces. But I think he's going to share a little bit more about from the author side.
Well, first of all, I think this is a great example of how we're working towards collective efficacy at the high school. Stevenson High School in Illinois would describe collective efficacy as being competence and awareness of that competence. And that's really what our goal is here, for us to really spread the word of great things that are happening in the school and giving educators a chance to do that. For me as an author, it's just been great to be able to write about and share some of the great things that we've been doing as I've been interacting with teachers, and giving other educators a chance to do that as well. Has been really rewarding. And when we released this at our Monday faculty meeting a couple weeks back, you could tell how excited all the authors were and their colleagues to read about the things they were doing. So I think it's been a great step forward for us, pun intended there.
We learned a lot about not only what our authors have put forward here, but also in putting the project together ourselves. We're really proud of it. It's beautiful. The artwork inside are from Oregon High School students over the course of time, so we highlighted that as well. We also learned that more beautiful, colorful artwork adds cost. And but we were project committed because really the work that our teachers put into it is outstanding. And so we'd entertain any questions that you have, or at this point, we appreciate your support.
Yeah. Board members, I'll look over here first. Troy or Courtney, anything? Any questions?
I don't really have any questions, but I just have to say I really enjoyed reading this. When I was reading the board packet over the weekend, I think it was late Friday or Saturday night, I had pulled open the board packet, and I usually try to get the some of the boring stuff, the bills, out of the way. But I got to this really late, and I couldn't put it down. I finished reading the whole thing at night. So I really enjoyed this peek inside of the high school and what great things you're doing. So yeah, I want to say I can't wait to see what's next.
I did the same thing. I was just going to read one and just kind of do it in little nuggets. I just kept reading through it. It was so good. Yeah. Courtney, anything?
No, I did not read the whole thing. I did read little nuggets, so I've started it. I haven't finished. I'm going to be honest, but I think it's really, really super, and I hope that it continues and grows and matures, and that you learn more about the process of writing for each other and learning from each other, because I think that's really exciting. So, kudos. Really, really great.
Anything over here from you guys? Krista.
One of the benefits of having a kid with the flu today was it gave me an opportunity to read this. But no, like they've said too, we're learners as board members. We're learners as parents with kids that have gone through the high school, parents of kids that are getting ready, like Andrea, to go into the high school. As a professional in my business, I learned a lot of things through here. It's really amazing what you're doing, and I think sharing this is going to benefit people in a lot of different ways, as a parent, as a business person, as a board member. So thank you for doing the work that you're doing.
I did not read it all yet either, but I did go through all the pictures. That's the way I did go through all the artwork. Yes, and I read just a couple of them so far, and it when I started working with the board, I just told everybody this is going to be a real education for me, because I am one of those people who ask, what do you do exactly? And it was fascinating to me. The other thing that I found validating, I hope it's validating, I should say, is that it always helps me reflect on what it is I'm doing every day when I write it down. And so I hope it was that kind of experience for some who spent the time writing in here, because it gives me a chance to put all my thoughts down and to remind myself, oh, that's what I do every day. And so it was fascinating to me. Again, I've only read probably 3 or 4 of the pages. I love the pictures, the artwork, and I'm looking forward to reading through the rest of it. And I do need to take it in nuggets, because otherwise it kind of washes together for me. So thank you for giving me a copy. It's always easier for me to absorb when I have something to read as opposed to something on a screen. So thank you.
Thanks.
I know one of the
Barb?
things that
Go ahead, Andrew.
that Brad and I held very highly was that each author's voice came through, and I think they really do. And I know you may not know who these folks are, but their voice really comes out in the words that they chose to put on the page. And writing is hard, right? We all know that writing is hard. So the opportunity to go back and forth with the author, Brad worked more closely with some and I worked more closely with some, was really a privilege and a pleasure to do. So yeah, I hope you appreciate the different voices.
Yeah, go ahead. Or go ahead, Courtney, then Barb. Yeah.
Just going to ask, have you gotten feedback from your colleagues as they've read this, and what is the feedback from your folks that both participated and contributed and who didn't, and are people excited to contribute next go round? And
I think we've gotten really very positive feedback. We released it at Monday's faculty meeting a week ago, and we're coming back to dive in a little bit deeper on our PD day coming up on this coming Monday. And so the feedback has been extremely positive, and I know that we've got a number of people in the queue, so to speak, because we got more than we could put into this first issue, and so it'll be a vehicle that we continue to use. Yep.
Barb, go ahead.
I hadn't started. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful product, and to me, it really highlights the professionalism of our staff. And I don't know how you would do this, but I hope you think about opportunities to share it outside of the school. And I know you don't want to be handing these out to people who will not read them, but it's really impressive. And so I think we should be thinking about that.
Yeah, that was one of the questions I had, is what's the distribution plan for this, if any?
So I think what we're going to do is link it to our website, and I think it's something that while the audience was really one another here, I still think that there are, for folks who are outside and parents and others, people who are not a part of our school. We through our instructional rounds, we bring in partners from other area school districts, from the university, from Edgewood College, and some of the people who have seen this already are really excited. And so I think it is a way of just highlighting the good things that are happening here, and I think we'll get outside of our walls with it for sure. Probably a lot of electronic versions more so than the hard copies. Yeah.
One other question I had is, are we really going to have bluegills in Wyland Pond?
You haven't read that yet?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, we've given birth to piglets, and we've given birth to goats, and they're
Goats,
already.
that's why I
We're
wondered.
breeding panthers next year, apparently.
Yeah,
but so the bluegills will be a lot safer.
Just let me know, and when you stock the pond, yeah. Well, that's why I would need to know. Anyway, these things take a lot of work. I mean, it's a really beautiful product, and someone who writes articles for a magazine, it takes a lot of time just for like a 3-page article, and to get 12 of those put together and as high quality and as beautiful product as this is. I know it took a lot of time, so thank you for the efforts. It's pretty spectacular. So it speaks well to our district. Thanks for being on our agenda tonight.
Thank you.
Then we move to Forest Edge, keeping our wildlife theme going. Update. Yeah.
There we go. We have a couple of things to chat about tonight with respect to Forest Edge, and just to lay 3 of the items out. I'll give you a really quick construction update, and then we'll talk about the board tour, which I didn't get an opportunity to confirm with Katie, but she will have a date for us when we get to that. And then Leslie today did a marvelous job of sending an email out to all staff to give an update in terms of where we are on new staffing with Forest Edge. And we chatted today and thought it would be a great time to just bring the board in the loop on that update as well. Some of these pictures, I'll get started with the construction update. It's room temperature. It's really nice because outside it's not quite room temperature, although in certain portions of the building it is almost 70 degrees, which is very nice. And then there's portions that would be 7 degrees, like the thermometer said this morning. Maybe Andy will need to click for me. Thank you. You might remember this day. This was one of those days where it was 90 degrees. Goodness gracious, it was warm, but beautiful weather. And June 7th is when it all started with the groundbreaking ceremony. And you can see pictures of our K-6 students along with the principals getting that exciting process going. Here's a really quick overview. We have 2 floors. There's 2 floors at Forest Edge. This happens to be a building layout of the 2nd floor. Again, one of the unique features of the building is the east to west span, or west to east span, however you would like to say it. On the west side of the building is more of the public building area where community members will walk into the cafeteria area, and I'll say a large community center, almost so to speak, during non-school hours. And then we have the gymnasium on the left, and to our right as you walk in the building, that's our instructional portion of the building. It's multiple floors on the back side. Remember the front side of the building where the principal's office is and the kindergarten classrooms and the music classrooms, that's a one-story, but then on the back side, those are all of our classrooms. This is the, I'll say, rendering that Bray Architects, and you've seen this before. Right now in February, doesn't that picture look beautiful? Where it gives us a sense of warmth in May and through the summer months. And I know on September 1st, that open area in the front will be jam-packed with parents and community members and students coming to their first day of school, which is a super historical event. If there was one suggestion I could make to board members, check what your calendar is like on September 1st. There's never too many people at the first day of school. It is an experience. I've had the privilege of doing it a couple of times in a couple of different communities, and it's one of those days that you will remember the rest of your life. And I've already checked the weather. It's going to be between 60 and 72 degrees, and there will be a gentle breeze with an almost perfect sky. So if it's not that day, it will be someday that week. No, no. I'm a meteorologist too. But we have a new meteorologist starting Wednesday for a couple of days because I'm going to be out of town just in time for maybe a weather event. This is a picture that some of the comments that I get from Quick Trip folks, why are you making the school blue? And I said, well, that's actually part of the construction process. About a week and a half ago, maybe 2 weeks, we had the opportunity, Findorf puts together a recognition luncheon for all the construction employees. And I just happened to sit down at a table, and there were a couple of construction employees sitting across from me, and I said, oh, tell me what you guys do. And they said, we're the blue guys. So I got a rather detailed explanation of that process, and in a nutshell, it's waterproofing. And it's waterproofing that goes over the entire building, and that blue part will then, there will be zinc panels that go over that blue part, and I'm not exactly sure when they're coming, but I know they're temperature related, so they're waiting a bit on that piece of installation. This is just one of the most beautiful pictures of the building, and I think some of you may have seen this before. If there is a money shot, that's the money shot. You can see off to the left Lake Monona. Just outside the camera lens is a picture of the Capitol, but the rolling terrain, the school is just, the students did a great job naming the school Forest Edge. You look at that picture, that is a phrase that just pops right out at us. And here's the, I'll say, specific blowout in terms of where the school's located in the northern part of the district. We already have an address, 4848 Brassica Road. And I heard that. And this is a really quick summary. Carrie Majeski's not here tonight. She is at a concert, but she is going to use this particular slide when she is my guest next week at Rotary, and her program is talking about all of the planning from a principal perspective that goes into opening a new school and what it's like, and her and I brainstormed this page as a super fast takeaway. All of us know that it's grades K through 6. There's a lot of community members, if they don't have children in school, they're not they know it's elementary, but they're not specific on what grades. We also wanted to be clear about the capacity, remind folks of the roughly 10 acres. It's just a shade over 10. I know Andy knows the decimal point perfectly. And then remember that conservancy. That's immediately west of the building, that City of Fitchburg property. And then, of course, that opening day, which I've already given you that perfect weather report for that. So that is, in a really quick nutshell, an overview without getting too cold. And this is going to be a test of my ability to remember. I'm going to take a risk. Is our date? April 6th? April 6th or April 7th will be our board tour. And by that time, while I would still wear some boots, just in case we get, I'll say the S word, snow or rain, it might be a little messy, but we will be able to travel through the entire building because a fair amount of the building is already painted. So by that time, we should have no concerns whatsoever in terms of warmth. And then a super important piece Leslie's going to share in terms of the staffing, which we are excited about, our staff are excited about, and I will turn it over to Leslie.
So I sent out an update this morning so that everybody sort of knows where we're at this point, and that our phase 1 of hiring is almost complete. We still have a few open positions. So here's how the process went. The positions for the new school have only been posted internally thus far, because until all of the houses begin to pop up at the rate we know that they will be popping up, we're really talking initially about a reshuffling of where our students are in order to alleviate some of the overcrowding at RCI. Consequently, we are not hiring right now at this moment a lot of teachers or any teachers at this moment outside of our school district. For example, we are hoping to be able to have 4 sections of 5th graders, students who would be going to RCI if Forest Edge wasn't there, and having them at Forest Edge, along with 2 sections of 6th graders. So that makes approximately 120 to 125 or so students who would have normally been at RCI. Because they're not all new students, the vast majority of them are already with us or have been moving in over the course of this year. We don't need to hire new teachers for that 125. We need to have 6 teachers from RCI move to Forest Edge. That's why our postings at this point have been internal, especially for grade level classroom teachers. Now, when we're hiring a world language teacher, each of our elementary schools has a world language teacher, so we will need to hire someone outside of the district. So, with everything posted internally thus far, all of the K-6 principals were the round 1 committee. So they interviewed everybody together, and then they sent people on to John and I, who were the round 2 committee. And then Carrie called a lot of really happy people to talk about, will you please come to Forest Edge? And right now we have a few classroom positions that are still open. So as of this evening, we reopened these positions in WeCan and made sure everybody knows exactly what is still open to give them one more chance to decide if they want to go this route. So we have, about 20 some teachers hired already, and Carrie is setting up tours. I believe the next possible tour for the staff, the first staff tour for Forest Edge is March 3rd. She already has staff newsletters that are going out to people who have been hired, and she is reaching out to the principals of the K-6 schools to talk about how can we start helping kids become, who don't know her, and are at Prairie View and Netherwood and RCI, become familiar with her so that they have a face in case they are the ones who are assigned or volunteer to start their next school year at Forest Edge. So we're thinking of all kinds of things. It's not just who will be teaching what, but we're also thinking about the schedule, and we're working with a consultant to put together a 5-6 schedule that will be the same at RCI and Forest Edge, or as similar as we can make them. A lot of things are pending our start times work group. We're thinking about how we can help students with the transition, because this will be a really big thing for a lot of kids. It will also be a really big thing for the kids who maybe are staying at their current school and are happy that they are, but their best friend is leaving. And we also know that it will be an opportunity, but also sometimes a challenge for a lot of the schools who have had really terrific, high-functioning teams, and now one team member is leaving, and coping with that kind of change will be something that all of the principals are thinking about at this time too. But it's all going really well, and we have the vast majority of phase 1 positions already hired. The other positions will probably be opening up once we're really set on how many students will actually be there.
Board members, we're happy to answer any questions that you might have about Forest Edge Elementary School.
On budget, on time so far?
Yes,
Awesome.
on both accounts.
Good. Good. Any questions? All right. Thanks for the update. And April 6th or 7th, so if you let Katie know, so that we can lock down that date. Excited to see it from our last tour. And I don't think we'll have to climb a ladder this time to get to the second floor. That was unique, and I'm glad members of, yeah, it was a very big challenge for me as one who's afraid of heights. But it's good the public did not see us do that. Anyway, so let Katie know. All right, move on. Superintendent's report.
First, just a really quick comment about the high school professional journal. This is just a fine, fine example of continuous improvement. We can talk about it a lot, but to actually see it in action is a whole nother thing. The other item that struck me is this team's report is so representative of a vibrant school and a school that has a strong school culture. And we know that schools that have strong school cultures, that translates to student achievement. So when I had the opportunity to see this fancy but very, very nice report, and I do love the color pictures. It just helps bring the artwork of our students alive. And thanks for picking some students that go back in time. As I see their faces, I can remember them. So I really enjoyed reading this. Kudos to Jim and all the teachers that were part of this, and I look forward to reading the next one. In terms of something on the horizon for the board, the administrative team, along with staff, we're working on the 2021 staffing report. We plan to present that to you on March 9th, and then get final approval on it a month later at our board meeting in April, which will be April 13th. In terms of school starting time, Leslie touched on that a bit. Tomorrow evening is the school start time group's third meeting, and their fourth meeting, and I'll say final meeting, is scheduled for Tuesday, February 18th, with the plan of reporting back at our next board meeting. So they have done a lot of work, a lot of background work, and a lot of synthesis and analysis, and I know they're halfway through their meetings, and they will finish that up next week, and boy, did that process go fast. I took a look at our calendar, our district-wide calendar today, and on virtually any night you can pick a concert or a possible play to go and see. So if you haven't looked at the calendar for a while, or you have a free night, please go and visit and see our students in action. And I also saw the Brooklyn Musical is scheduled for February 27th at 1 o'clock, and then again at 6:30 at the PAC. Right around the corner, while it's not March Madness for us, it's March Parent-Teacher Conferences. And we have, when I looked at the calendar today, we have parent-teacher conferences running from March 2nd to March 19th, not every day of the week, but those 3 weeks we will complete the spring conferences in the district. And what a great opportunity for our parents to come and visit with our teachers and to connect in terms of where their sons or daughters are academically. And then lastly, I put an update in the weekly update about Governor Evers' special legislative session, which I hope occurs, but I picked up a little more information on it today. There is a proposal of $80 million for special education, and today I saw that the Oregon portion of that $80 million is right around $350,000. Now that doesn't mean we can go out and spend that money, because that still would need to be approved, but I was pleased to see that that is a possibility. I'm hoping the session actually occurs, because there seemed to be bipartisan support for special education in the previous state budget. There was also a component for school-based mental health. Again, it wasn't super large. It's about $20 million. I believe it's a competitive grant that we could apply for. So that's an item on the horizon. Something that doesn't apply to us, but does apply to rural school districts. In particular, it's a program called Sparsity Aid, which would provide additional support for districts that are not in thriving communities that are growing. And then lastly, the governor proposed a $130 million program for general aid increase, which, if you remember when Andy talks about that, that's additional money that we'd get from the state called state aid that would help lower our property taxes. And one of the reasons that the governor proposed it, and I loved his quote, we can invest in our kids and reduce property taxes by giving public schools additional aid money. So I know that's a hotly debated topic, but remember, with a revenue cap, when you're talking to someone, that limits what we can spend. So if we get more money from the state, that directly reduces everyone's property tax. So I know there's lots for that to go through in terms of conversation and discussion, but I'm hoping that special session does get called here and that we can take action on these important educational bills that would help us in the 2021 school year. I will stop with that and see if I've created any questions.
Don't see any. Thanks, Brian. Great. Goes on to moving from E to F, closing future agenda. I will have formal notification of appointment of the committees for next session after having conferred with you guys and kind of running my thoughts by that. But we'd make that official at the next meeting. Katie's told me that we're going to have a petition to change district boundaries, so we'll have to consider that. We get those every couple years from that involve neighboring districts, so we'll have that. Anything, Brian or Andy, that's on our agenda? I know, Courtney, you had an idea that you want to run by. You want to real briefly preface that?
Sure. With all the changes going on in the district and the growth that's happening beyond the village borders here in Oregon, I would like to have a discussion and potentially propose changing the name of the Oregon School District to the Oregon Area School District so that it represents the fact that we educate kids from 11 municipalities around the village of Oregon. So
we will have that on as probably not an action item, but an informational item to have discussion about that and kind of what's involved in it, you know, what are the pros and cons, are there any unanticipated consequences of that for consideration? I know it's something that's been floated, from time to time over the last number of years, but it's, given the growth, it's probably time to look at that and decide whether it's something we're interested in and where we go from there.
Okay.
So we'll have that on the agenda. Okay.
Thanks.
Brian?
Yeah, and one other thing, board members, Andy usually comes in the month of February with a 5-year projection, 5-year plan. So from our conversation last week, he should be all set for our second board meeting in February, which is timely because then the next month at our meeting in March, we'll be talking about staffing plan. So he can give you a big picture review of where things are shaping up budget-wise.
And I'm assuming as part of that would be a real rough ballpark guess of what discretionary funds the board would have available. Okay. Good. Anything else on the agenda? If you have anything, let Brian or me know before next meeting. We'll get that put on the agenda. All right. Checkout. Barb, how many more meetings? Yeah. Yeah. Assignment. Yeah. Tim, anything for checkout? Krista? Courtney?
Yeah, just a brief story. So I know a lot of you know that I do a lot of work for Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, and I'm chairing another gala, and we often produce videos to show at our event. And I was very happy to use the PAC this last weekend to produce our video, and I wanted to give a shout out to Nate Mendel, our PAC director. He was very accommodating, and the kids had a great time. We had a couple of kids from Oregon, but kids from outside our community here. But we are so blessed to not only have such an amazing facility, but that the facility is open to community members for all kinds of different uses. So it's not just for a play or a production from school kids, but it was really, really wonderful. And I'll share the video with anybody who wants to see it after our event. But yeah, it was really nice of Nate. He was there on Super Bowl Sunday, so it was super nice of him to be there. And
When's
help us
your
out.
big gala? Put in a plug
March
for that.
14th. March 14th at the Monona Terrace.
Courtney's the
Anybody wants
chair
tickets?
of that. She's been chair for a number of years. It's a really huge event. I think you raise about $500,000 for juvenile diabetes research. So great. Troy? Anna had contacted me. I neglected to mention that she had a conflict tonight with one of her children's youth activities, so she wasn't going to be here. So she has no comment on closing. We're going to recess for 5 minutes, and the board will gather in our side conference area to entertain a motion to move into closed session for a personnel matter under Wisconsin Statute 1985 1C F and G. Board would not return to closed session or to open session at that point in time. Thank you.